Hello. I want to talk about the sometimes soothing nature of hatred and the healing nature of grief. I'm Carla McLaren. Welcome to episode 5, season 2 of the Off Ramp Project. I got a comment on one of my YouTube videos about emotions, and the person said, I don't know how to love, but hatred is easy, ordered, and motivating. And I didn't know how to answer it. I was also gearing up to go into our yearly grief ritual, which I teach with my dynamic emotional integration colleague, Sherry Olander, and my colleague and husband, Tino Plank. The grief ritual is something I learned. I had to go out of my culture because in my family, we had just zero grief practices, zero grief traditions. It wasn't a good gig for me anyway. And I grew up grief impaired like a lot of people, and finally found a grief ritual that was created in the Dagara tribe in the village of Dano in Burkina Faso, West Africa. So I learned an African grief ritual. And because Burkina Faso is such a poor country, there's a lot of death, I would say unnecessary death, maternal death, infant death. There's a lot of death in the village. And so the grief ritual is very specific, and there's a lot of pieces to it to help protect the people from the tremendous amount of grief and loss that they deal with all the time. And though there's a lot of boundaries around the grief ritual, grief itself is a massive emotion that contains sort of everything. And grief, like water, will change its state throughout the ritual. It's an amazing thing. If you want to join us, we do it every year online, and it's always an international grief ritual. So this weekend, as I'm doing the grief ritual and just watching grief move through myself and all of the people, I'm thinking, I understand more now why a traditional grief ritual requires so many boundaries and thresholds and rules and processes and the song and the drumming and this and that. And it seems like, people are just throwing a lot of stuff at it, but this comes from an ancient tribe, and they've perfected the grief ritual over many centuries. And I realized that because grief is so massive and it changes so often, you need community, you need other people around you to grieve in a way that is going to move you forward into being able to honor what you've lost, to accept the loss to the extent that you can. You can still be fighting and raging, but also to honor it and to move forward as a person who has had that relationship or whatever situation or health picture. You had that, and then it is gone, and there's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is come to the next day as a person who has lost so much. Or perhaps you're a person who never had the thing, never had a happy childhood, never had a happy relationship, never had what other people seem to take for granted, never had perfect health. And with a grief ritual, you can go through the process of deepening yourself and becoming more open to the flows of the world, rather than what I would call grief hardened, which is where you don't care and you need a lot of structure, not just in a grief ritual, but all the time. So these two together made me realize that hatred can be extremely soothing because it gives you boundaries around who and what you are. I hate you, and therefore you contain all of the problems of the world, and I, who am not you, am exalted, right? It can be such a beautiful boundary process to hate. And on the other side of that is adoration, which is not love. It is infatuation. It is a projection kind of a thing, putting all of your wishes and dreams onto a thing or a person or a musician or a relationship or an idea. And again, adoration is also wonderfully soothing because now I am the person who looks at the person who is the adored, or the music, or the talent, or whatever it is. I am separate, I am less than, and you are more than. And with hatred, I am more than and you are less than, right? There's a tremendous polarization and projection. But the person who talked about hatred most intelligently, I think, is the psychoanalyst, Carl Jung. Carl Jung created something called shadow work, which is to help people pull back those projections and release some of that extreme boundaryness of you are the problem and I am the solution, and you are bad and I am good, and you are white and I am black, and you are male and I am female, and you're right. All these very, very simple minded things that help and that can soothe when there's too much going on. As I looked at everyone grieving in the grief ritual, this is an online ritual, and we find that we need kind of more structure around it, more containers around it, because we're all, at all parts of the planet. Um, and I, kept asking myself, it doesn't feel right to me in a regular everyday context to have this many rules. And of course, there's fluidity within them, but there's some places where, nope, we're done here, and this is this. I realized that because grief is so large and because we're all over the world, we need more structure. And to see, I don't know how to love, but hatred is easy, ordered, and motivating. It really spoke to me about what we're seeing in the United States now and in other countries as well, where there's an extremist patriarchy, and patriarchy is a hierarchy of human worth, and I talked about that in episode 4. Hierarchies of human worth will always damage everyone within it. We see people at the top of a patriarchy, males, and we think they've got it made, but a patriarchy is a hierarchy of human worth, and they're always damaging. And so males are getting as much damage as females are. We're more aware of the damage that happens to females, but they are not alone, right? You can't be in an abusive system and not be abused yourself. It's the system is the abuser, right? So we've got whiteness at the top of a hierarchy of human worth. We've got males at the top of a hierarchy of human worth. We've got rich people at the top of a hierarchy of human worth. Tremendous polarization between the rich and the poor, between men and women, between white people and anybody else. But as our world becomes more and more what you can't pin it down, right? Lots of things are happening. We had COVID, we have global warming, we have we're getting more and more. Are we at 9 billion people yet? We're there's a lot of us, and there's a lot of difficulties that we're creating for each other. And I'm just seeing how the polarization, which is an aspect of hatred, right? A hierarchy of human worth has the good people at the top and the bad people at the bottom. So the good people are the ones we adore. Somebody does. And the bad people are the ones that we hate. Yeah. And so the simplicity of it, the simple mindedness of it, it is ordered and it is motivating, because I know where I fit and I know where you fit, right? Something that's really interesting, Carl Jung noticed that hatred and adoration are basically the same thing. You just attach yourself to your hate target with hatred and projection. You attach yourself to your adoration target with fandom. There's a relatively new word, stan, which means a fan and a stalker put together. So a stan, if I stan somebody, I stan Beyonce, it means I'm a little bit of a stalker. I'm a little bit obsessive about her. But the funny thing is, the word fan comes from fanatic. So now I'm a super fanatic. I don't know. It's fine to to when you're younger to project everything onto some famous person, right? It's one of the ways that we function. And Carl Jung said, without projection, we would never get out of our parents' house, right? There wouldn't be anything pulling or pushing us. We require it to do things. When I was a younger writer and just dreaming, I wasn't a writer yet, I was dreaming of being a writer. I idolized like Kurt Vonnegut Jr., idolized him. But as I became a writer, I developed my own style and then was able to go back and visit him. But would I have been able to even see myself as a writer if I hadn't kind of attached myself to Kurt Vonnegut Jr., who, like me, is a weirdo, right? He's not just a regular everyday person. So projection, adoration, hatred, they're a way that we can be in this world. But as I watched grief and the massiveness of it, I saw that staying in hatred or adoration, both of which are being intentionally pulled out of us during this Trump era, right? You either think he's God, and that's a terrible thing to do to a living person. That's extreme violence to do to a living person. That's how you create cult leaders. They don't just grow up, they get manipulated by their followers as well as manipulating them. It's a disgusting relationship in both directions, right? So we've got Trump, who is either working for God or is the chosen by God, or maybe he's Jesus, right? A horrendous thing to do to a living person, horrendous. But so we've got extreme standum, right? We're standing Trump on one side. And then on the other side, we have that we hate him, that he's Hitler, that he's a fascist, he's a rapist. He's using those terms turns him into a thing, right? A thing that we're free to hate. And we're free to do violence upon, either trying to do violence upon his body or doing violence upon him through funny jokes where, we turn him into a giant bloated baby or something like that. The extreme standum of turning him into some kind of godlike figure is just as damaging as the extreme hatred of turning him into a figure of derision and interpersonal violence where we want to destroy him, right? We think whichever side we're on, no, we're on the good side, right? But again, that's polarizing. If you are idealizing Donald John Trump, the human being, or if you are hating Donald John Trump, the human being, you are doing violence to him, right? Either way, it's hatred and adoration. It is polarization. It is simple-minded, but it is ordered and it is motivating. We have someone to hate. We have someone to idealize. We have someone to make into a god. We have someone to make into a devil. We're all good. So Carl Jung saw this, and later brain studies showed, now this was in the fMRI, which is a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine. fMRI was used a lot, and there's a lot of problems with it because it zeroes in on a specific part of the brain that they're expecting to see. So there is some observer bias in fMRI studies, right? But what they found is if you showed a picture to someone that they, adored, like Beyonce, and someone they hated, like Hitler, that the same area of the brain lighted up, right? So adoration and hatred live in the same part of the brain. They're the same process. They're the same thing. They are projecting extreme evil or extreme good onto someone else. And that is very ordered. It is very boundaried. It keeps the world organized. And when I tend toward hatred, when I tend toward idealizing someone, I have to ask myself first, go do your shadow work, which is looking at what it is that I hate about Hitler, what it is that I adore about Kurt Vonnegut Jr., And what we find with both is I'm talking about myself. That if I want to have a functional, peer-based, one-on-one, conscious awareness of a person, I don't want to be in adoration or hatred, because that's just me projecting, right? So I'm going to put a link to shadow work uh, in the show notes, because I think it's so important. Um, I'm talking a lot this season, well, last season too, about the cultic nature of what we're seeing in the modern world. We're seeing a lot of cultic behavior, a lot of polarization, a lot of manipulation of emotions, a lot of manipulation of empathy. If you're being asked to adore or hate someone, you are in the area of projection, you're in hatred. And you are, if someone's asking you to do that, you're being controlled, right? And I don't want to be controlled. I'll control myself. Thank you very much. But but this is how cults work too. Cults create they create gods and they create devils. They create saviors and they create monsters. And so we're seeing that happening with Donald John Trump, with other leaders as well. Um, and we're seeing immigrants being turned into devils. We're seeing trans people, LGBTQIA plus people being turned into, you know, like boogeymen who are going to come get you, right? When polarization is happening, there's always cultic control happening as well. Um, no one who loves you or cares about you in even the smallest way is going to ask you to move into hatred or polarization or black and white thinking or hierarchies of worth, hierarchies of human worth. Nobody's going to ask you that unless they've got an ulterior motive, usually to gain power through what you're willing to do with your emotions, right? Grief can wash all of that away. Grief is an amazing emotion that is, it's very powerful. A lot of people don't understand the difference between grief and sadness. And the difference is this, from what I see and what I am working on in my dynamic emotional integration process. Sadness is an emotion that arises when it's time for you to let go of something. And if you're not letting go of it, then sadness may bring tears, may bring a slowing of yourself so that you can let go. In sadness, you have a choice and you're not taking it. A lot of people push their sadness away because they think their sadness comes to steal their stuff. And that's not what sadness does. Sadness comes to say, you're holding on to something and I can help you with this. The sadness didn't create the problem. The sadness is responding to the problem. Now, the difference between that and grief is grief comes forward, or grief's, area of influence is when you lost something forever and you didn't make a choice. It wasn't your choice that your mother died. It wasn't your choice that you lost your job. It wasn't your choice that the fire came through and you lost your house. It wasn't your choice that there was a pandemic, right? It wasn't your choice that the mortgage rates stay so high that you can't afford to get a house. It wasn't your fault. It isn't your fault. You didn't choose the things that created loss in you, right? And so grief comes forward to help you when you are in this place of choicelessness, right? And grief helps you let go of what is gone forever and learn how to honor what it was, to honor what you lost. And it's a beautiful emotion. And when people can work with grief, they can deepen and deepen so that they are such a blessing in this world. They're such a blessing to be around. But I don't know about you, in most of white American culture, excuse me, there is not much of a grief tradition at all. My grandmother, none of us liked her. She was a scary woman. When she died, it was an open coffin, and my sister and I, we were like 9 and 10, had to go up and look at it to give our respects. That was horrifying. I never want to see that again. My other grandmother that we loved, my dad's mother, my dad doesn't have any belief in the afterlife or anything. It's silly and that there's nothing to do about it. So we didn't know my grandmother was sick. And he told us later that she died. There was no funeral, no, there was nothing. There was nothing. It's just like put her in the ground. Um, so both of those were pretty terrible. This is why I needed to go and find a grief tradition that wasn't even from this continent, right? It was from West Africa. But what I've noticed is that for those of us in the modern world, especially the modern white world, there aren't a lot of grief traditions. There is the Irish wake, but I don't have enough Irish in me. Irish ancestors who are still Irish. So we came here a long, long, long time ago, like in the 1700s. So we don't really have a wake tradition. We don't have a funeral tradition, except that awful one with my grandmother. Um, Mexican Americans have a beautiful tradition, which is Dia de los Muertos, which is they're revisiting and honoring their loved ones every year, right? Many Japanese Americans have beautiful Shinto ceremonies. Many Jewish Americans have sitting Shiva, where you take a whole year to experience the loss. Um, uh, Chinese Americans often have elaborate funeral rituals and ancestor shrines and right stuff that I didn't have any access to. So if we don't have a practice for grief and we're losing things all the time, COVID, job loss, loss of hope, loss every 4 years, someone's going to lose because we have this ridiculously polarized political system where you only have two choices. It's Democrats, it's Republicans, and never the twain shall meet. And so, the country goes in this wild swing every time we get, a different political party in office. So much loss, so much trouble. And if someone's going to give me a chance to hate someone behind that, and I've got this ordered slice of I'm good and you're bad, I'm I'm sweet natured and you're horrible, I'm God possessed and you're Satan possessed, just really simple minded stuff, but it gives you shapes, right? It gives you shapes where grief is oceanic. It's sort of everything, and you can't control it because that's not what grief is about, right? You can't control it when grief is there. Grief didn't come and steal your loved ones, didn't steal your job. Grief comes to help you move through it. Yeah. So what I would say is to the person who says, I don't know how to love, but hatred is easy, ordered, and motivating, I would say, who are you a stan of, right? And that's one kind of way into love. That's one kind of step into love, because at least you have this, extreme positive regard, where with hatred, it's extreme negative regard. How stepping into love, now grief is a massive thing, and love is even more massive. And in my book, The Language of Emotions, I say that love is not an emotion, right? It's bigger than that. It's deeper than that. It's deeper even than grief. And so I would say adoration, Carl Jung would say adoration will get you out of your house, and so will hatred, right? Any of these projections will get you out of your house. And once you're out, you can see, what would it feel like? Look at the shadow books, right? What would it feel like to take off some of that boundary around who the other person is and who I am? What would it feel like, right? How would that change you? It's okay to hate. It's very soothing to hate. I sometimes love to hate, right? And it's very soothing to project, sparkles and everything onto another person while you yourself don't know what a writing career might even look like, or what your next step is to sort of scaffold yourself onto the talent of someone else. You don't want to do it for the rest of your life because you're not going to get anywhere, but to understand that that's a really important process. When you can do your shadow work, hatred is some of the most I mean, you can evolve 1,000 years in one afternoon if you can do your shadow work. Because when your soul claps its eyes on someone who's like the perfect hate partner, you are telling yourself a story about yourself, about things you've never been allowed to do, but that person gets away with it. Hello, or things that you do to yourself when you see that person being cruel, and you don't realize, no, that's how I treat myself. Um, no, if that person's cruel, right, for real, they need to go to jail. Okay. It's not like sort of, I'm taking all of my projections off and then you are a perfect being. Nah, you're still a creep. But with shadow work, you can learn how to be with creeps without throwing yourself into the polarization and simple mindedness of hatred and adoration. Instead, you can have a larger view of the world. Thank you for asking that question or making that comment, especially during a grief ritual when I could see just how healing it can be to be in hatred and adoration. It can make things so simple, right? It can be like getting a really good filing system going, the good people, the bad people, right? But if we're going to heal the polarization that we've been thrust into and manipulated into and continually manipulated into in social media, we've got to be able to see the world with better eyes, with a wider view. And we've got to be able to reach across and say, I have been taught to hate you, and I would like to learn something different. Have you been taught to hate me? And what questions would you ask me? Right? The way out is through. It is not through allowing yourself to be a battery in somebody else's machine. Rather, it is to unhook yourself from machines and these artificial boundaries of hatred and adoration and polarization and patriarchy and matriarchy and anarchy and all the archies. And instead, let's figure out how we go forward together. Again, I will say the Braver Angels group is really helpful. They have you can go to their Zoom meetings, you don't have to go in person. They have a workshop called Depolarizing Within, and they give you a handout, right? Because you're going to want to keep reading it when someone comes up to you and they have a very different idea about how the world works. And you immediately go to polarization. It's how to sort of challenge that in yourself and step away from it and come back, make a mistake, come back, make a mistake, come back, and try to become a more whole human being instead of a very well bounded, ordered, motivated polarizer. Yeah. In the next episode, I'm going to talk with Janja Lalich, who is my colleague and an internationally renowned cult expert. And we're going to just talk the way we talk. And there will be swearing. Okay. I'm very aware not to swear during these, but my friend Janja, she is who she is. And you'll love it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.